Hey everyone, just give me one more second, doing the final push on the marketing side, and then we will get going. Alright, there we go. Hi, I'm Tim Von Rieden with Concept Cookie, and these are one of the weekly live streams that we do here. And we do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time in America. And if you're outside of the States, it is -5 GMT now. And I usually post like an hour, sometimes 2 hours before the live stream on what the subject matter will be. And for the entire month of May, I wanted to do something a little different with this live stream, where rather than it just being kind of a one-off of you guys watching an hour of something being done, I wanted it to show more of a progression. So for each week in the month of May, I'm going to continue where I left off on the last week, and we're going to create a character from all 4 weeks. So there's going to be 4 weeks where I'm going to be doing this, where I'm going to be continuing on the same character. So today I'm going to be doing a lot of like the preliminary work, so a lot of the sketching, silhouettes, anything that kind of involves the first stage of creating a character. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And as always, I'm going to keep the questions on the side here. So if you have any questions, and it doesn't even have to be related to the actual content itself, if you have any questions about digital art or something you're struggling with in Photoshop, feel free to ask it, and I will make sure I get back to you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, share my screen out. Okay. So a lot of the first stuff I like to do is kind of getting warmed up. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. Let's just go ahead and start with some silhouettes. So the first one I usually like to do is just to get a good stance, get my hand ready for what's coming. I usually just do standard proportions on a character. And you'll see a lot of artists do this where like they'll do a few preliminary sketches where they don't really look to create anything final or trying to create anything from it. It's usually just to get going for the day, because usually this is the first sketch of the day. Sometimes you might be a little rusty, not like crazy rusty where you're going to have to put like a half hour of work into it, but enough where you want to go ahead and kind of get back into that groove that you may have had the day before. So a lot of the time I'll usually just sketch out shapes or something that gives an impression of clothing, fabric, whatever it may be that I'm trying to do. So if this guy was like holding a weapon, let's say, literally you can draw just a few lines and there's already an impression that he's holding a weapon of some sort. So I'll make that much smaller. And usually I don't work this large when I'm working so early. Usually I like to work much smaller when doing little silhouettes like this. But it all kind of depends on the content of what I'm working on. So I think for this character, and like I said, I want to do an entire character for the month of May. I want to do something character-based. I don't want to do a creature. I don't really want to do anything hard surface. I want to do something very organic, very character-based. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to be like catered towards, is this a villain, is this a good guy? It could be anything. And I don't really have any like oops, I'm going to turn that off. I don't really have anything in mind before I went ahead and did this. So literally, if you guys have any suggestions or something cool you might want to see, feel free to add it in the comment section, and we'll see if maybe that will take off. Oh, and usually I like to make new layers for each of these sketches, so I'm going to go ahead and copy and delete. And try not to spend more than a minute on each of these preliminary sketches. Let's go ahead and get a girl in here. And I think for you guys, let me see on the stream, this might look kind of small. Okay, no, it's large enough where you can see it. Let's go ahead and add a girl. Actually, I don't even like how that's looking right away. So a lot of times when I'm doing these, I'll sometimes just skip the whole anatomy part where I'll go straight for what they're wearing. And if you're feeling really confident and you're like, yeah, I know exactly this girl's going to be wearing this kind of vest top thing, then you can kind of skip stages, but it depends on what you're doing and how confident you are at that moment. So even right now, I probably should have done the anatomy stuff. I'm not really liking some of how that jacket's looking. Kind of like it though. Maybe she has like a t-shirt underneath. And sometimes you just won't like some of your preliminary sketches. Like that one I really dislike. So I'm just going to go ahead, move on from it, and not really worry about it. Or maybe let's try something more kind of crazy. This one will be more fashion oriented, where you can kind of work with like large shapes and play with things that are more abstract for a regular person to be wearing. It's like maybe it would be cool if she had like this really bulky looking dress, then her legs just jut out under it, and they're just solid color. If these were like black or something. Which brings me into the next area of how you can go ahead and start stuff like this is silhouetting. So maybe I'll go ahead and do that for this character. I can see a lot of comments coming in on the side, so I'll get to those in just a second. Gotta make sure my eraser is this chalk brush as well. Oh, and that's another thing I probably should have said right at the start, is I'm using the chalk brush to start these off. I kind of like the look of that, where it's like this really heavy underside. But I still wanted to, maybe she's like wearing a hood or something up here. And her face would be somewhere under there. It's almost like this giant cupcake. And that's where I would take my eraser brush then. Slim it down in areas. All right, let me go ahead and answer some of these questions before it gets too far down here. Someone's asking, you're working on a 13 HD, right? How do you keep the lines so flowy? It's hard for me to draw from the arm when the surface is so small. So right now I'm working on my Intuos 3 tablet, so I'm not working on the Cintiq. I usually only work on the Cintiq if I'm doing things that are very line specific, and admittedly I probably should be using it more, but I am so comfortable with my tablet that I almost find it unnecessary, especially since I find that I work better with colors on the actual tablet than I do on the Cintiq. And I know you can edit with the color stuff, but for some reason it's just a comfort thing for me where I'm still used to using the tablet more. But I'm sure that will change in the future if I go ahead and get either a larger Cintiq a year from now or something. Someone's asking, you always draw with skeletons, Simply Start? I guess I find it harder to draw with the guidelines than without. So I guess if you're doing it more skeleton based, you would be doing something like this, where you draw. I always start with the T. So I guess that's something that I should note out, is I always start with the T to give kind of a proportion of the shoulders and the torso and like the backbone, and that gives me pretty much all the fundamentals I need to go ahead and draw the rest of the character out. So those are the hip bones, knees. So I'm basing all my proportions on the initial T that I created. And that might not be comfortable for you. Maybe you start off with the hips or something else. So even like here, the ribs are probably a bit too big. Can make those smaller. And there's my shoulder joints. And this is the very static 3/4 pose that I'm very comfortable drawing because I've done it so many times. And sometimes you'll get better at doing things like this just purely through repetition. So this would be like the bone structure of setting it up. So I guess I can put that on the side here. So let's say we wanted to take it a step further. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of that layer. Move it to the side. So let's say like this was my base that I could work on top of. Let's say then we wanted to go ahead and draw on top of it. I'm going to go ahead, let me think of what would be kind of cool. Let's give him a cool jacket. And oftentimes with silhouetting, you're blocking it out so much you lose a lot of the skeleton forms underneath, but that's okay because they're implied and you don't have to worry about whether or not the proportions are accurate because you already did a skeleton study. So you know in the back of your mind that it is accurate. So it's one of those things where you just got to keep telling yourself, yes, this is right, even if it may look, visually it may look wrong. You did, you started off correctly, so you don't have to worry about it. And oftentimes I'll add little flares like that just to give more interest to the silhouette. And that's something you'll hear a lot about, adding interest to a silhouette. And pretty much what that means is you want it to have some kind of an original look to it where it would be distinguishable in a lineup of characters if you block them all out. So something just as simple as whatever these things that are flailing behind them, that could be enough to be a key proponent of who the character is to distinguish him. Something like that. So that would be kind of an example of how you could start with a skeleton and then work on top of it. Someone's asking, is the skeleton and the silhouette on the same layer? No. So those I did put on separate layers, but I grabbed them together when I moved them. And I'm going to do my best to answer these while I'm working. So if sometimes you'll hear me like pause or I don't draw for a second, it's because I'm moving the questions down. Someone's asking, I didn't ask in the last stream, so I'll try it now. Have you ever tried making animations, like flash animations or something? So what's funny, and I think a lot of people don't know this about my school, is when I went to school, I actually went to school to be a 3D modeler. So my background is actually not in concept art, it's actually a 3D modeler, so I had to do a lot of animation stuff, and I did learn like the basics of Flash, and I had to make a little animation, and then I had to make one in 3D. My 3D one, it wasn't too terrible, but nothing that I would be wanting to show for sure. But something that we've talked about at Concept Cookie and with one of my friends who's really good at motion graphics with After Effects and stuff is we wanted to show you guys how to create like a web comic and do a full tutorial on showing kind of the process of how to make pretty much what you draw come to life and have cool little filters or whatever behind it to really amplify it. Someone's asking, do you fix up the anatomy later on? Yes, absolutely. So a lot of the time, and you'll hear this a lot too when people start, is you want to find the gesture of the character. So the gesture is actually more important than the anatomy or anything that's more detail oriented. So right now, I'm just focusing on creating the gesture of the character. I also want to let's do another kind of interesting form. Oh, Angela's here. That's really exciting. Hello, Angela, or Zeppo, I should say. She was one of my good friends back in school, and still is. What am I saying? A sci-fi desert nomad. I kind of like that idea. And now in a second here, I'm going to draw something that I normally don't. And my friends they poke fun at me that I usually don't draw large characters or very busty females or older gentlemen or very like overly muscular characters. So I'm going to go ahead and give those, at least do a few of them, give some variation to these sketches here. And I'm a huge fan of the baggy pants, or a lot of people call them MC Hammer pants or Aladdin pants. So I usually add one of those on one of my characters, even if it's in the sketch phase. Oops. Put that one on the side. Alright, so let's first do busty female. I'm going to go ahead and make my canvas size smaller. There we go. So I usually don't do very busty women, and I think it's mostly because I find that since most artists tend to do it, I tend to avoid it, and I actually try to do more smaller breasted girls, just because I think we need more of them in our industry, especially when I think League did Jinx, which I don't know how familiar everyone is with League of Legends, but they did a very small-breasted female character, and it was by far my favorite concept of last year, and it was like a huge statement, I guess, for Riot to put that out there. So it was one of those really cool things where I'm glad to see that not all women in games and the entertainment industry have to be like these voluptuous, large-breasted women with skinny waists. Someone's asking, is there a difference between male and female gestures? And I'm going to say yes, in the sense that usually with male gestures, I keep more of my lines straight edged, where with females, I try to curve it a bit more. But that's not to say that's always true. Like, I could definitely make female character. Let me go ahead and do that actually. So most times I'll try to stick with even more curvy poses for girls, but that's not to say that you can just do more of a static pose and it be just as feminine, but not in the way that the curves are lined up, but in the way that you dress them, obviously, in the way that their stance is giving off an attitude. I guess a male wouldn't tend to bring their leg up that high. I mean, that's not the best example, but something where, yeah, usually I'll keep my feminine lines saved for girl silhouettes where males will be more straight edged. Someone's asking, do you ever start a character and change your mind halfway through the draw? Yes. And oftentimes I'll still finish it just because I feel very determined at that point. But yeah, a lot of the times I'm not really enjoying a character I'm working on, and I'll want to change it, but I get to a point where I need to finish it regardless. Actually, that is way too detailed for starting off. I guess I'll just do a few more silhouettes and then I'll go ahead and kind of take these to the next step. Maybe this guy has like a giant something or another gun, maybe. Just wanted something to give it the silhouette some more interest. Someone's asking, can you do an overweight silhouette? Absolutely. And actually, when I started the live stream today, I was thinking of doing one of my characters that I've never really drawn before, and her name's Grizzy, and she's like this older boat captain, but she's grizzled out. Her real name's Charlotte, and she is just this kind of overweight older woman that is just a badass. And I've always wanted to give a good sketch to her, but I think since I'm so unfamiliar with working with larger shapes, I've just avoided doing it. But that's working out of fear, and I feel like that's a very negative thing. So I should really face my fear, and that's why I'm going to do the silhouette right now. Because then there's also a lot of the things you have to think about with an elderly person on the way that they stand, how their posture might be a little crooked. And you kind of want to show the weight of their years either on their face or in their attitude, something where you can tell like this person has gone through a lot. And that's why concept art is so cool, especially characters, because I feel like you can tell a story just in a character silhouette, like just in a standing character silhouette. And I do prefer very basic concepts like this. And I love illustration pieces, but I feel like for concept art, you can tell a character story just by a single three-quarter stance. And if the character doesn't come off as a very strong character, then in a three-quarter stance, then it's probably not a very strong character. So something like that. Usually I like to work in a three-quarter pose, and especially for something that I'm unfamiliar with, you can definitely see the proportions a lot easier. Something like that. Someone's asking, by character tutorials, I meant on the Concept Cookie website for premium members, if you could get Paul Kwan to do one, that'd be amazing. So we've talked with Paul before, and he's currently doing an interview with us, and he may do a tutorial, but he's still kind of on the fence, and he may do it just on his own. But he is definitely someone we reached out to before. And for the summer, and I know I keep reiterating this, but we will have a new tutorial author every single week for the entire span of summer. So if you are a citizen member, you will be getting a new artist with a new tutorial every single week. So that's what we've been kind of saving up a lot of the tutorials for. So yeah, there's definitely ones, and I guess at the end of the live stream today, I can show you some previews, and I'll give you some inside looks at a few of the results of the ones that we have so far and the ones that are in progress. I usually don't do action poses like that, but for whatever reason, I felt like doing one. Someone's asking, which do you prefer and find easier, gestures or silhouettes? That's a really tough question. For me, it usually just depends on the character. So for like, if I want to do something where I want to do very bold, like let's say, just kind of like the one down here, where the legs, I imagine them in my head as these very dark, statuesque, kind of strong silhouette things that came out of the dress part, and it wouldn't have been as strong if it was just in a sketch. So it kind of depends on what it is that I'm drawing. And I guess I don't really find one easier than the other. I don't really prefer one. I'm sure if I did more of these on a consistent basis, then it would definitely be one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely find it a lot more comfortable to do one over the other. Can certainly do a character with a hood or a cloak. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and extend this canvas. And get rid of that terrible one on the bottom. I'm not a fan of that one. Okay. So let's do one with a hood and or a cloak. This one, let's do sort of a longer silhouette phase, or a sketch phase. Right, usually don't do these as often, but since I kind of warmed up with all of this, I feel more comfortable with my line workings at the moment, so I can just kind of go for it. And I usually recommend don't doing characters from the side, preferably if you're doing like concept pieces, because you got to remember that if you're at like a studio or something and you're doing a side view, well, you're cutting off half of the view of the character, and that might be really frustrating for a modeler or the next person to look at it and be like, well, I can't really tell the entire character. And sometimes from the side you can't get a good reading of like how large they are compared to their proportions, especially when you're covering it up in a hood or something like this. So now I'll make him smaller. Now for legs, I often find that people always want to make sure like, oh, I gotta make sure the top leg is bigger than the bottom leg. But if you look at pictures, or even if you take a picture of yourself, you'll notice that sometimes the size variation, especially if you're wearing like pants or something, it really isn't that big of a change. So oftentimes when I do like pants or a study with a character like this, I'll usually keep the lines for the most part pretty parallel to each other. Give them some boots. Actually, those legs are a bit long. So let's say thinking, the proportions of those legs aren't looking too right for me. Use my selection tool. Either push them up like that, or I could even grab, let's see, my transform tool under edit. And you can do some crazy things with that. So let's say we wanted to make the feet a bit smaller. You can do that. Or if you wanted the feet to be more kind of closer to the camera, you can do that as well. So now if I undo those both, you can see the difference of before and after. So this one definitely feels more in perspective to me. Something like this kind of a silhouette is more fun to just play with, but obviously it takes a little longer than something where it's more silhouetted out or something that is sketched out really quick. So only every now and then I like to do something like this if I'm just starting out. And I definitely don't like giving too much of a face to silhouettes. I may give the eye socket some of shadow to it, and then maybe indentation of a nose, but for the most part, I like to keep the face undetailed, or else I'll find myself zooming in and trying to detail it way too soon than when I should start that actual process. Something like that. And now even something like this hooded character, I'm not too happy with some of the proportions, and it's a very static pose. And usually I'm a fan of static poses, but even this one feels a little too stiff to me. So I'd probably go ahead and edit that more in the next stage. So I'm going to go ahead and make this guy smaller. All right, let's say we want to do more of like a peppy girl. So something that's not like busty, something that's not like tomboy mechanic, because I feel like those are the two kind of generic female characters that are out there. So I try to avoid kind of going to either, where I hate the idea that females can only be one of two stereotypes. So that's why I really like ones that kind of step outside of the normal of what you are used to seeing. So we're going to give her a pigeon toe, and that's where the toes kind of point inward toward each other. That's just something that it's kind of joked that all the Final Fantasy female characters have pigeon toe. And since I obviously have a lot of influence of that style in my work, sometimes I just throw that in there as kind of a ode to it. Someone's asking, I hate starting with skeletons and silhouettes, and I just like getting into making drawing perfect. Do you have any suggestions? Stop. That's gonna drive you crazy. And I know I was kind of the same way where I would literally start off and I would do like line work and I would try to like outline everything, make it look perfect, and it would drive me up the wall. It would just eat my time away, and it was not a good habit. I think once you stop caring so much, and not in the sense that um, you shouldn't care about your work, obviously, but in the sense that you don't want to make it look perfect right from the start, and you don't need to make your entire process perfect. Once you kind of let that go and have more fun with it, you'll find that you'll actually become more comfortable in your work, and things will actually look stronger because your lines will be more confident. You'll have more energy in your pieces overall. Now this one I'm going to use my eraser tool to edge it out a bit more. So I guess to answer your question, try not to make things look perfect for the entire process. And it's something I can tell you from firsthand experience. It is a time consumer, and the sooner that you kind of let that go, the faster you'll get. I'm not sure what kind of girl this is supposed to be, like a clubber, or I don't know what I was thinking. So this is another way of silhouetting where you can use the eraser tool to kind of indicate like where the skin is and forms of the clothes. So let's see what we got going here. I'm not sure what kind of a character that would be. Go ahead, put her on the side. Because I never want to overwork a character in this stage where I'm spending too much time on just a simple sketch that I might not even be finalizing out. Someone's asking, what is the one feature you draw for the most for characters, and the one thing that stands out in your drawing? So I couldn't lie. The one thing that I love to draw more than anything has to be the eyes. And even with a character, even if I'm doing a full body, I'll always at some point put focus towards the eye. And I don't know why it's always been that way, but for me, I've always had a fascination with eyes and the way they look. And I think an eye can tell a lot about a person. So for me, I've always been generally drawn to the look of an eye. So on every character I do, if you kind of notice that I spend a lot of time on an eye, that's why. Just because I have this weird thing about eyes and telling the story through them. So here's my little eye sketch. I guess, but to answer your questions, because I'm sure you want to know about a character, I also really like having long legs, long limbs in general, and usually something with leather or baggy clothing pushed against really tight clothing. So if like a roll sleeve is rolled up, I really like adding those as well. Someone's asking, can you show the proportions that should be used for an infant and an elder? So if this is like a casual standing person, I'd probably put a baby somewhere along here, and their legs would be really stubby, arms would be pretty stubby. And then for an elderly person, I would almost just shrink them. I would imagine them shrunken a little bit. I would imagine them with a little bit of a hunch. But for the most part, the older person would have a lot of the same proportions, just kind of worn down a little bit is my best way to describe it, something like that. Obviously, that's a really quick explanation of proportions, but I think the best thing you can do is just Google it and look for proportion sizing charts. There are so many out there. Someone's asking, do you ever use stock pose photos as reference to start characters? Absolutely. So I actually find it weird for artists not to use reference in these days and age. If you watch a lot of professional artists work, sometimes they won't have both monitors up, but almost every artist will tell you they use reference. And for those that think that it's cheating, you really have to let that go, because it's what everyone does, and it's not because they're trying to cheat. It's because they're looking for sizing reference. They're trying to make it look more accurate. They're trying to make it look better in a sense. And if you think it's cheating, it's almost just hurting yourself and it's stunting your growth. So I really hope that you kind of leave that whole idea behind and can move forward, because otherwise you'll always be stuck where your peers are the ones that kind of let go of that whole idea. They'll progress farther and faster. And I guess another thing I'm always usually a fan of is heavier tops, so maybe like heavy winter coats or something, and then more slender leg and bottom half structures. So I think that like contrast of weighting is really interesting. Then add little details on top to give it more interest. Well, this is an interesting question. Someone's asking, okay, everyone always goes, how do you do this? How do you do that? What I'm curious about is, why did you start drawing? What got you into the industry in the first place? So I think with most artists, they'll tell you that they started really young. No really purpose, maybe just keep them occupied, something for the parents to put in front of them, just to keep them busy. But for me, I've always been very fascinated with drawing, and my older sister was very adamant about kind of helping me learn, even when I was very young. So I have a lot of pictures of her just like having coloring books open with me, and so I guess for me it's just always been it's been a part of my life always, as far as I can remember, and it's been very much, and I tell people this as well, it's been very therapeutic, where when I'm drawing, very much at peace. I feel very calm when I'm drawing. I feel like I'm doing something that I feel accomplished with. So I guess that's why I started. And then what got me into the industry? So for me, it's like another thing with most artists, concept artists, is something they watched or something they played really triggered and hit mental notes for them, where it kind of resonated with them to a point that they wanted to do it as well and share a story that would affect people the way that it affected them when they were little. So for me, it was Final Fantasy X had a really big effect on me. and Kingdom Hearts, admittedly. And I was like, I was just young enough where it wasn't cheesy for me. It was like perfect. And then I watched a lot of movies when I was younger, and I've been influenced by a lot of like Disney films, especially when I was younger, and a lot of TV cartoon shows. Digimon was a big one for me. And I think just the idea of being able to create a story and have it really affect someone, and it'll affect them for the rest of their life. And I say that because even now I still think those shows will always be with me, and the impact and feeling that they gave me, I'll always remember. So I guess my goal would be to eventually release my own work and hopefully have that affect someone the same way that they affected me. Create a diesel punk character. Okay, I think I saw that and that's why I started doing this one. Let's go ahead and keep doing that. She's got like a swimsuit underneath, just a bra maybe. There's some crazy pigtails there. But you gotta be careful because some things like even pigtails, they they stick with concepts that are very strong. So immediately I think this is a Borderlands 2 concept. And I think because those characters that are in that game that had those very um, loud, goofy pigtails, it's very it's very rememberable. So for me, whenever I do something, I try to avoid characters that have those very distinguished features already. Which sometimes it's hard to do that. Like obviously, being original is very very tough these days, and to the point where I almost just say nothing's original. Just do what you do and don't worry about it. But sometimes when something's so recent, I try to avoid kind of continuing the trend like that. You know, I'm going to hide some of these recent layers so I can focus on her a little bit. So I'm kind of liking the direction she's going in. I'm not really sure who this character is yet, but that's another thing that I should talk about more is kind of finding your character as you go. So with this live stream, like I didn't really have like a set character in mind that I really wanted to create. Instead, I just kind of like went with it and just kind of let the character develop on its own. So the coolest things about doing ones that are unplanned, sometimes you'll create characters that may become some of your favorite concepts you've ever done. And it's all because you decided to randomly start drawing characters, and then you'll get like random ideas like a diesel punk character that maybe you wouldn't normally do, and then it becomes something that you're really attached to. I'm not sure how to do her legs. Instinctively, I would just give her long, slender legs. Maybe I'll give her solid, as if there were leggings or something underneath. Hmm, maybe not. Sometimes I'll just come back to the concept. So I really like her. Maybe I'll even make a duplicate of her. And you'll see artists do this a lot too, is where they'll duplicate a starting image that they really like and tweak it a little bit and see if they like that version better than the first one that they did. So someone's asking, hello, new around here. Sorry, I got two questions. A lot of artists started with copying others' drawing. Do you think that's a great way to start for a junior artist? And yeah, I love Borderlands, by the way. Yes, I actually beat the first Borderlands, but I haven't really gotten around to playing the second one yet. So to answer your question, yes, I do think that's useful. I don't think it's a good habit to continue to copy them if you're not pulling something from it. The whole purpose of, trying to copy your favorite artist or uh, kind of create something similar to theirs is because there's something about their style that you really like and you want to take pieces of it to create your own. Now, it's not to say that you should just inherently completely copy their style and think like, oh, now this is my style too. What you want to do is you want to piece together things from your own life experiences, your own interests, and then pull in your artist influences as well. And hopefully you can mash that all together into something that will create your own style. So I definitely think it's a good learning experience to do that, but be careful to not overdo it, I guess is the only disclaimer on that. So someone's asking, sorry, I was AFK. When are you working on this character, or when you are working on this character, are you roughing out the costume elements as you go downward? So for this character, yes. Normally it varies, and I say that because I guess like maybe you've been noticing, I don't really have a set structure on how I go about things, and I usually just kind of let my instincts take over and whatever feels most comfortable at that specific time. So even with this character, like I don't really have any like plan for, okay, I'm gonna do this next, then this will be after that. I'm just kind of letting my mind be like, oh, this might be a cool shape to put against this shape, and then just kind of seeing where that takes me. If I don't like it, I can always erase it because we're at such a beginner stage that I can go ahead and not worry about how perfect it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this smaller. So I'm gonna kind of pick out a few of these to rough out more, and then let's see here. Because then I'm gonna end the stream, but I want a few of these kind of roughed out for you guys to pick from of which one I'll continue with next week. So let's go ahead and grab some of these. So this stream will actually go probably a little longer than an hour, which is okay. Joe's asking, when are we going to see your book? Not for a while, unfortunately. But some good news, and we're going to see if this will generate any interest in people, is since I've been going to a lot of conventions and I've seen kind of what other artists are doing, one thing that I will start to kind of collect and gather up for probably early next year is a concept cookie book that you can order, and it'll have all the references of like the nose, eye, like everything that we've done on the site that would be a good reference. And then the other half of the book would be like illustrated pieces that we've done or sketches that I've done of in like the live streams or tutorial results. And that includes not just my work, but all the tutorial results that we've gotten from other authors. And I think that would just be a really cool thing. But in terms of like my own personal sketches, I'm also going to start kind of collecting all the sketchbooks that I've had over the years and hopefully get a book out of purely just sketch work. And my illustrated novel that I'm always working on in the back end is it's taking some time, so hopefully that'll be one of my passion projects that I'll follow through with in the next coming years. So many questions, so little time. Man, if that didn't ring true. And I want you guys to know that recently we have hired someone to kind of help me out with some of the back end stuff of Concept Cookie. So I think maybe even next week she'll be on the stream and she'll be helping kind of mitigate the questions so that I'm not constantly stopping drawing and looking over the questions, finding one, and then clicking it to answer it, and then going back to the drawing. So hopefully the live streams will be a little bit more fluid in the future. Someone's asking, speaking of being original, do you think trusting your instincts is the best way to be unique? Kind of. Where I think your instincts is also pulling from your reference library. And I know Feng Zhu had a really excellent tutorial on this about how over your life you collect reference images that you kind of burn into your brain. And these stolen images are what you'll use as a reference for your own pieces. And you'll take bits and pieces from different references and then create something all your own. So yes, in the sense that you'll be mashing up all these different references and influences together into one piece, but no, in the sense that usually you're mashing up a bunch of other people's work, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just you might not even do it. It might be like unconsciously you're mashing up other people's work together to create something unique. But the other goal is, I don't think your goal should be to try to be unique. Just have fun with it and create something that resonates with you. And if you're happy with the end result, that's what really matters. So someone's asking, why did you stop 3D modeling? Time. It just, I'm so busy as it is that I couldn't even get back into 3D modeling. Not that I didn't like it, I actually really liked doing some of the obscure things like unwrapping. And I wasn't the biggest fan of rigging, but I guess in the future I might do more like sculpting stuff. So like ZBrush is definitely a possibility, something that I've been interested to get back into. What kind of pants do I give her? This silhouette is one that I would probably do like 7 different variations. So right now I'm just working with shapes that I think work well together, but I'm not really focusing on like, is this part leather? Where would her metal straps be? Where like would anything go? And I should be looking at more reference of sea pirates, or not even pirates, sea captains, and look at like their wardrobe. What kind of pants do they wear? Are they usually baggy, or do they keep it tight? Is there a purpose behind that? So the more reference and reasoning behind why you're adding things, the better your concept will be, the stronger it'll be for sure. Yeah, and I totally agree that the questions are a little out of order, so it takes me some time to scroll through them and find one. Okay, let me go ahead and push that one to the side. I'm not feeling the busty girl. I'm actually kind of digging this sketch. I almost see him as like a kind of a nomad, but like a younger, more irresponsible one. So I'm gonna go ahead and add him to the list of characters that possibly might make the cut, if you want to call it that. Give him some like silver hair, maybe like a really cool dark chocolate skin. So we'll see where that one goes. Okay, what other ones do I want to push forward? Not that one, not that one. Possibly this one. I feel like that one could be a cool turnout, depending on where I take that one. Actually, I really like the first one that we did today. Sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes it'll take a few silhouette or like sketches to get you in the groove. Sometimes you feel like, yeah, I'm kind of really digging this first one. And I think that happened today with this guy. Another thing is usually I like working on backgrounds that aren't pure white, and I find it to be more intimidating. Where usually I like to work on like a neutral background, so it's usually like a neutral gray. So sometimes I'll just add it in. And this is a good example of like I'm working on a layer underneath of the sketch layer, and And I'm not caring about whether or not that I'm separating them into their own layers. I'm not worrying about, does it look, perfect? Are the proportions accurate? Does the anatomy make sense? I'm literally just looking at, is this visually appealing? And then the other factors like anatomy and perspective and all that, those other things, I mean, they still come into play when I'm doing my initial silhouette. Like, I still have somewhat of a general idea of what I laid out, but for the most part, I want it to be an interesting silhouette that can tell a story of a character just by what he's wearing. So even with this, you can kind of have fun with making the silhouette a little bit more interesting, especially if like you're working for a client, maybe you edge them out with like not a rim light, but you're trying to just separate the silhouette from the background here. Sometimes like the very sketchy stuff is more appealing than the finished work. And that's because sometimes I think it's more tangible to the person looking at it. Like they can see, oh, I can kind of figure out how they created that. And even for me, when I buy art books, I'm sure you guys know I'm a huge fan and collector of art books. I have like 80 behind me right now. I love just seeing the sketches of a lot of the initial stuff. So especially for movies, I love to see the initial concept work and like the ideas that went into the character creations. So now for this character, I'm going to go ahead and give him more of a nice silhouette. And you can see how just this very little addition that I'm putting onto this character here, it's really making it more into like an interesting piece visually. And I didn't add anything to the character's clothes, or I didn't do much besides give him a background, give him some kind of a color interest. I'm using this darker like maroon color. And that's it. Like I'm not doing anything crazy. And maybe like if he was wearing suspenders from the back, hanging low. Little things like that just add so much to the character design. And I actually want to even, I gotta stop saying the word actually. And I gotta edge this out. I think that would be more interesting if the spear kind of went, or whatever this weapon was, went outside of this little border that we created for him. Like that. So you can see how kind of cool something like that would look, So you don't think that you have to pressure yourself making something look perfect. Sometimes the unfinished stuff and the things in progress are more interesting than a finished product. Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end this stream off here. But before I do, I'm going to give you some snippets of the final results of some of the results from tutorials that we've been giving from these AAA artists. So you guys get a little sneak peek at what's to come. So we go here. And I know you guys can't see my screen, but right now I'm going to where I keep everything. Okay, the first one that I'm going to show just a little preview of is this sketch, and it's from, her name's Piper. She is a fantastic digital artist, and she's just a cool person in general. And I met her through her Pokemon drawings that she did. We contacted her to see if she wanted to do a tutorial. She was interested. So here is a preview of her her initial sketch, I should say. So it was like this funny little pug with two heads, and that was like the initial sketch that she did for us. And then after it got approved, she did a colored version. Bam. So I'm super excited to share that one out with you guys. It's definitely one of those where I love this artist's use of shapes and using shapes to really give interest to a silhouette. I mean, if you just blocked out the dog and just a black silhouette, you could see all the shapes from the ears, the squared off ears, and the head even, and then the body itself. And obviously the chubby little legs I'm a fan of, as I think most people are. Okay, and then one more I'm going to share with you. Actually, I'll share two more with you guys. So here's another one. This is from James McDonald, and he is a really cool guy as well that can create these cool little things like this that are just kind of fun and interesting. And he gives a really good layout to his initial sketch, to laying out colors, and then kind of cleaning it up, creating this final image. So that one I'm really excited to share with you guys as well. And then one more that I'll share with you guys is this fantastic warrior pug. And this is done by McLean Kendry. And it's a really fun tutorial and one that I'm really excited to share with you guys. And these are just 3 of the entire summer extravaganza that we're hoping to release for the entirety of summer. So definitely stay tuned if you're a Citizen member for new tutorials every single week from these AAA authors. So I want to thank you guys all for coming to this live stream. I'm going to post these results onto the Concept Cookie Facebook page, and I'll number them. So we'll either go with, let's see here, I can do it right now, I guess. So we'll either go with Concept 1, this fashion girl, this nomad, Grizzy, or this punk girl character. So those are the 5 options, and then next week I'll grab one of these and then do a few variations of the character, maybe even do them in different poses, and then get them set up for doing more of the detailing, rendering, shading process. And as always, I want to thank you guys for coming to these. We do these every Wednesday, and I know I wasn't able to answer all of your questions, and maybe I'll answer a few more before I cut this one off. But we do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time. And if you're outside of the States, it's now -5 GMT. And you won't need to know what we're doing next week, because for the entire month of May, we'll be creating one of these characters from start to finish. Okay, so really quick, I'm going to try to run through some of these questions. Someone's asking, could you add links to these people for us? I will once we start doing the promotion stuff. So not next week, but the week after, I'm going to put out a big, and we're going to start doing a lot of marketing stuff where we'll link out to all these people. But I will also put links on the Facebook page about these people. How do you stop being lazy in art? Draw every day, maybe even only if it's for an hour, but the more that you consistently do it, the more comfortable you'll be, and the more that you'll enjoy the process rather than it being a pain or like a task or like a chore that you have to do. Let's see here. Yes, I'm a sucker for art books as well. It's like my only treasure in this life that I'm like, this is gold, and I need to protect this, I need to collect it. Someone's asking, do you use reference later to double check your lighting and anatomy? Not so much lighting, where I feel pretty comfortable at this point with my lighting skills, but definitely if it's on a new leather or a new material that I haven't worked with. So sometimes even with metal, I'll sometimes look at reference just to really see the contrast between the lighting and the shadows and how that works. And then anatomy, not usually, unless it's something really weird where if like the knee's bent in a weird way. And I'll even take it to a point where I'll just take a picture of my own knee if needed. But yeah, I'll usually look it up on Google. Yes, so this is a great quote, or not quote, but something Peter Moorbacher said. And I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So that piece right there, that's a Peter Moorbacher work. He is a fantastic artist, and I even got it signed by him, so I'm really like one of my little, that's almost just as good as one of the art books for me. But yeah, for him, he says that when you copy an artist and you admire and draw what he does, it'll only be a worse version of what already exists. So you have to add your own inspiration to add something to the piece and make it your own. And I couldn't agree with that more. So, and actually, if you guys are interested, Peter does live streams a lot, and he has a YouTube page. I believe every Tuesday he has one that you can go ahead and watch as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end this off now, or else I'm going to go way over my hour limit, because I really want to show you guys how to create a character in just 4 hours collectively within the live stream. So thank you guys for watching. We'll be here next Wednesday at 2 p.m., and stay tuned for what's up next on Concept Cookie. All right, bye guys.